We used to sing a song when I was a kid that say, the closer we get together, the happier we will be. For my friends are your friends, and your friends are my friends. And so the closer we get together, we have had an exciting day and a half, and we have asked individuals who were engaged in workshop activity if they would come and share with us in this culminating experience the recommendations that are coming from their work groups. And so I don't know if we want to have an order, but we can start with any reporter that's prepared to come. Mr. Ed Coleman will be the very first one, and we can't thank Ed enough. He is the executive director of Bethel New Life, a large social service economic development agency on the west side of Chicago that at one time had enough programs and program activity to be called its own community. So Ed, thank you so much. He is an engineer. We don't have nearly enough engineers in Black life. He is an engineer, and we've also wanted Black boys and girls to know that they can learn math and science and learn engineering. And so Ed is indeed a role model for that, Mr. Coleman.
Thank you it's working right. Thank you very much. I'm actually an old enough engineer to have been a founder of the National Society of Black Engineers way back when. So, we did a workshop on economic opportunity, and it was wide-ranging, discussing business development activities and opportunities, workforce development, and technology, and how technology influences economic opportunity. It was wide-ranging. I encouraged dialogue. We didn't want to give lectures. We wanted people in the audience to tell us how they interpreted economic development. It ended up being a very good conversation. The net results were along the lines of people need to be made aware as much as possible regarding the kinds of opportunities there really are out there. In particular, entrepreneurial opportunities associated with money and with hand-holding and grooming people to run businesses, how to help people manage businesses, as well as people need to be made more aware of what the skill set trainings are from a workforce perspective in terms of opportunities for high demand jobs and careers. And so we talked about such things as transportation, distribution, and logistics, advanced manufacturing, and in particular IT and cybersecurity and those types of things. Bethel is involved, this is commercial for Bethel. Bethel's involved in many of those economic development activities. That's our whole mission, economic development on the west side of Chicago. So that's what we talked about. We talked about it in general, and I think it was a good discussion.
Thank you very much. Let me ask if anybody's got a question they'd like to ask Mr. Coleman about anything that's burning and in their heart. One thing about asking questions, if there's something that you don't know and you don't ask, when everything is over, you still won't know. And so if you've got a question or a thought or an idea, please ask it. Yes, sir.
And you say you with Bethel New Life?
I'm CEO of Bethel New Life. That's correct.
Are they still in existence, and at what location?
Are we still in existence? Yes, we do exist. Our headquarters address is 4950 West Thomas. Used to be the old St. Anne's Hospital. So it's about a block away from the intersection of Cicero and Division.
And there's a whole history about St. Anne's Hospital, which used to be there. St. Anne's ultimately closed because they weren't making money. I used to be the vice president of the board of St. Anne's Hospital. Mary Nelson was the president of the board. Mary Nelson is the woman who created Bethel New Life. And when the hospital went out of business, we had to try to figure out how to keep all of those buildings from becoming an eyesore, vacant buildings in the community. Bethel New Life was one of the partners who figured out how to keep that complex occupied and not have a whole bunch of vacant buildings sitting over there with nothing in them. And so we are grateful, that whole community is grateful to Bethel New Life, because if they had not figured out how to do that, that community could not have existed.
And those of you who don't know, we do have senior housing occupying most of the old hospital rooms. So it was done before I got there, but it's doing okay. You got a question, sir? I would love to participate in that. Bethel's laser-focused mission is economic development. Entrepreneurship is a key element of that. So doing it through things like creative arts, such as movies, I think is a great idea. So we'd love to participate in that activity. So,
and if I could just add, Minister Plump absolutely became the #1 devotee to Harold Washington during the Washington campaign. After the campaign was over, and the movie that he's talking about is real. It's not some imagination. The script has already been written. I didn't know that Brother Chopin was here. I have a copy of it. I have read it. And right now, they're in the process of trying to generate the necessary money to make the movie itself. And so it's not pie in the sky. It's not some imagination that Minister Plump has. It is real, for real.
All right. I saw two more questions, one here, one here. Let's go to here first.
For young people, especially those that come from the least of income, is there a way that we can start some type of incubators throughout the city? Can you think of ways that we can do this so that they can become, let me get another.
I can repeat the question. I think the question is for young people, people who are not yet adults, who can be exposed to business, entrepreneurship and incubation. Is there something we can do in that arena? Bethel's right now, our audience tends to be adults, but there are other organizations. I'm actually meeting with UCAN next week. And I know UCAN is doing some things exploratory-wise that we're going to talk about in detail next week about how, you know, and I wouldn't be surprised if we have some kind of collaboration that focuses on that specific activity. Stand by. We'll talk about that a lot more.
All it takes is creativity and thinking. I visited a group of young people in Springfield, Massachusetts, several years ago, spent the whole day with them. They have developed their own corporation. They own a credit union. They own a store. They have their own board of directors. They make money. The inner city of Springfield, Massachusetts is pretty much like the inner city area of Chicago. So yes, young people can do anything that they have the creativity and the mind to do it. The guy who founded St. Louis, Missouri, Augustus A. Shoto, was 14 years old when he led the expedition. There used to be a guy named Alexander the Great who, when he was 19 years old, had conquered everything there was to conquer and sat down and cried because there was nothing else to conquer. You don't have to have gray hair. You don't have to be old. All you have to do is have imagination and creativity.
I don't want to dominate this, but I keep getting questions, so there's another one here. Yeah. I'll repeat what he said. So we have an entrepreneurship, well, first of all, I did mention our entrepreneurship training program. To get into that, you have to have a business concept. But other than that, we have workshops twice a month where we talk about, and one of those workshops every month is how to start a business in Illinois. So you come to that workshop and you'll be in a room with other people who may not have a firm concept, but they think they want to be entrepreneurs, and you'll be able to socialize with those people.
One of the best examples of that I know is a fellow named James Cole. James Cole has a shoe shine stand at Central and Lake. He started his business walking up and down Madison Street with a kit. He is probably now a millionaire. He used to own the great big building across the street. He was part owner of the Austin Bank. And when I first knew him, he was walking up and down Madison Street at Madison and Kedzie with a little shoe shine kit saying, "Do you want to shine? Do you want to shine?" Willie Wilson just gave an example earlier. Here's a guy who only finished the 7th grade, who now has a business that grosses about $60 million a year.
That's pretty good.
It just takes belief, faith, and creativity. That's all it really takes is faith, creativity, and vision.
You had a question, then I see another one. Let's start with this gentleman here.
I got a question. I know that the Republican has the House and the Senate. Is there any way possible the Congressman can create something that will come back to the district that will do an entrepreneurship program or expand what you're doing? Because I'm trying to do the same thing, except doing more engineering and technology.
I can't speak for the congressman. I do know that we can always benefit from additional investment. We're a nonprofit, right? So we don't have unlimited funds. So,
you can start by taking your $7 or $8 that you spend for breakfast and going to a soul food restaurant and eating. You can go to one of those same kind of restaurants for lunch. We like to cook dinner ourselves, so we don't generally go out to dinner. But the first thing is to cast your vision where you are. The main problem that black businesses have had in Chicago is the fact that black people do not patronize them. Every bank, there used to be 7 or 8 black banks in Chicago, black owned. There's only one black owned financial institution left in Chicago right now. Illinois Federal Savings and Loan, that is owned by an African family that bought it from Ghana, and there is a Liberty Bank that is actually owned by black people in New Orleans, Louisiana, that took over the old Community Bank of Lawndale because black folks were not using it. There's no other answer better than that. Everybody in here got a car. There's nobody here that didn't ride up in here without being in a car. You cannot find a black automobile dealership in Chicago. Everybody in here got a car. You cannot find, there used to be 8 or 10. Al Johnson Cadillac.
Yep.
R.A.L. Dukes Oldsmobile.
Yep, I remember that. Yep.
Dinwiddie Edwards Ford. All kind of black automobile dealers. And so you cannot have the rain without the thunder and the lightning. Yep. You cannot have power, talking about what could be created by a congressman. If you ain't voting, ain't no point in talking about having no power in this country. And there are people who talk smack and don't even register to vote. You cannot find them on the voter registration rolls. So if you can't do the time, don't do the crime. But that's the reality of life.
Can I take one more question, Tiama?
Yeah, one more.
One more, yes. Oh. Oh, you are? Okay. Thank you for the endorsement. I think we do well, so I appreciate it. All right. That's it.
All right.
Okay.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you indeed.
Do you have somebody else to go in there?
I'm mad.
You want to go next?
I don't mind.
Right here.
Okay. Do I need to set up? All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Michelle Pfeiffer with Women of Power, and so we met together with the women, and we were talking about how we can support the state of African American men from the women's standpoint. So we have some points here that we talked about. We talked about education. We talked about federal funding for ESL for descendants of Negro slaves. Hold on, I need them glasses.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so we wanted the same treatment as other races receive when it comes to learning and languages, so that was one of the recommendations that came out. We wanted to also acknowledge the distinction of the descendants of slaves as a people group with distinction needs. So Black people must be counted as our own group, so that was one of the recommendations that came out. Funding for parenting classes as an after-school program for parents. And then also for education, recruiting African-American male educators, because we indicated that we didn't see a lot of male educators in the school, so offer incentives for male interns or potential educators. Legislator for all teachers to be trained in the culture before actually working in the actual urban communities. So that was another recommendation that came out under our education. And then another one was to create an urban dictionary for educators. So when they're coming into our communities, that they understand our language. Greater use of school council authority. Better lunch programs. They wanted to bring back more hot lunches in all schools and not just some schools. Restore also truancy, and also expose our youth to economic successful people. That was our education. And then for homicide, we wanted more grief counseling services for family members of homicide victims through funeral homes, where they offer bereavement services, and they wanted to see if we can get connected with there, and also resources where ladies can go to for help that has actually been traumatized. For poverty, youth economic empowerment programs and curriculum to provide financial intelligence, management opportunity in the schools. So we wanted to bring that back in, and also mandate it where the corporations, because they actually come out and do financial trainings, and they would mandate the school where they would reach out and get connected with the corporations and have them come in and teach that financial trainings. Economic empowerment programs in prison or reentry. And then also policy for small businesses and opportunities, small businesses and corporations to give back to the community. So we said that if there are small businesses that are not of our culture and they're working in our community, that we will hold them responsible, and they would have to provide back funding or mentorship or some sort of benefit to work in our communities. For prison, we wanted to access, we stated insurance companies for homeowners insurance. And so we mentioned that some of that funding that goes into the homeowners insurance, that we wanted to request those funds to be donated to a fire station to provide training to ex-offenders. And so instead of sending them to a halfway house, that they will have housing available, and that the fire department can do some sort of training and schools teaching plumbing and things like that for the ex-offenders to be trained. We wanted to also note that we wanted to add, under the U.S. Census, add a question, how many people, how many kids have been incarcerated families or parents, or give an account for their needs, because if we're going to create a policy or program, we need to know what the census is. Also, schools to excuse absence for children and visiting incarcerated parenting. So we allow excuse students for other places. So we wanted to add that for children of African American that's visiting incarcerated parents, to advocate for the parent or the child and also that relationship. Employment. We wanted the schools to restore field trips and expose economic success and personalities back into the schools for employment. And then healthcare was one that they added, and they wanted to access the lead epidemic through the water and pipes impact of mental surge towards the violence, because they feel that the lead and the things like that that's in the water, it's causing violence in the actual individuals, and also funding for churches to provide counseling founded in faith and hope. So those were our recommendations.
All right, thank you very much.
Any questions? Anybody?
We'll take
Oh.
2 per group.
2? Okay.
Hello? I think we all, didn't we discuss starting our own school system?
Oh, yeah,
With the
okay.
people in that community who were of the same race?
Yes.
So that we can have people who understand the children,
Amen.
who love the children,
Amen.
and who are able to successfully take them to the next level.
Yes.
Amen.
And also, I think we didn't we discuss also bringing the churches together as a vital force
That's right.
to do Isaiah 58.
Churches.
God told them they are responsible for the
Amen.
widows, the orphans, to undo the bonds of injustice.
Amen.
And God told the church
It's in the book.
to break every
Hallelujah.
yoke. And it doesn't take money to do Isaiah 58. Nada. If we go out there and do it, we have more money in our community because everybody's in there taking the money to their community. So I'm just saying that if we can just do that, we will solve our problems.
Okay.
We don't need help. We can do it ourselves.
All right. All right. Okay.
Just like to add to that, if anybody's thought about it, but having a program to teach people how to run for local office. If that came out in your conversation,
No,
was
that
another
didn't come
one.
out.
But I see a need, at least from my vantage point, for the youth and young adults and adults to have access to, okay, what are the logistics of running for office? Obviously, there's a money component. Obviously, there's a people component. But how do you create a program around the stuff that they'll miss out on, like the paperwork? I'm sure is overwhelming.
Okay, that's good. All right, we got that one? Okay. Any more? Okay.
I just have something to say towards everything that was just been said, because I think it's extremely important to what Harold Washington stood for here in this city. When Harold ran for mayor, he was able to bring the entire city around him like none other. Mm-hmm. No other time in Chicago's history has the black community come together as unified as they did under Harold. I personally believe, after doing research and writing the movie The Greatest Good, that if we create as a people here in this community, what the West and the South Sides, a campaign election for Harold to re-elect him for mayor and get his message to reverberate around the city and around the world that these things will occur. The kids don't know what Harold's message was, and as we're trying to reach out to him, or as we're trying to reach out to the children and get them to understand the importance of this, somehow it's just not registering, especially with the registering to vote. I mean, that was what Harold stood, that was the biggest thing that he did, was get hundreds of thousands of new registered voters so that we could accomplish something great. We can do it again if we stand behind him again. So
all right,
just
good.
Say that.
Okay, how many more? Okay, we got another one? We got one here, young lady.
I don't know if you covered this, but one of the things that we have in the black community is women supposedly competing with their mates or whatever, and they made women principals in the schools and whatnot, as opposed to having a black man. But did you discuss anything about black women being their husbands, their sons and grandsons' biggest cheerleader? I know I'm guilty. My son was MBA of the year at FAMU, and I was in the nosebleed seats, and he said, "Mom, we heard you on the floor." And I'm like, okay, but we have to become team members. Did you discuss how we can be better team members so black women and let black men know even more so that we got their backs.
Yeah, and I think we did talk about a lot of that when we met together in the focus, and so we talked about problems and things, but in this meeting we were strictly focusing on like solutions and what are some things that we can actually implement as a policy or a program that can change in legislation. So, but we did speak about that in the past. Yes?
Yes, I'd just like to share a thought for the future. The late Harold Washington, and you can take a note on this because you're hearing it from me first. Yes, this is our comrades. The late, great Harold Washington aggregation campaign for 2019, Congressman. Yes, Chicago mayor for 2019. We are preparing now to win, to take this seat. I am Harold Washington, but not a candidate that's running for the mayor. Remember, Congressman Davis, we did the plebiscite, remember? And the people decided Harold as the candidate. We need to not reinvent the wheel, but we need to keep it real. So it is truly 10 by 10, so we can get ready to do that. God bless your heart.
Okay, next one, Congressman George Williams.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
We convened a discussion around 3 subject areas: criminal justice, reentry, second chance, violence, and public safety. We had a very vigorous discussion. I have about 3 pages of bullet points. Plus, also during the session, there was a number of young folks that was in the room, and I suggested to them. Richard Hart was one of our co-facilitators, along with Cook County Commissioner Dennis Deere, and 103.5 Mr. Stan Sertillion, Kyle. So one of the things that I suggested was that folks take the opportunity to text me recommendations and thoughts and ideas, and I've gotten so far about 25 text messages from the young people, and as well as others. And so, not to belabor the time, I'm going to put these bullet points together as well as the text messages, Siama, and I get that to you, Congressman.
Can you give us just one, George?
Well, you know, his was one that kind of caught my attention was one of the participants said, you know something, I think that we did a disservice by separating out the seniors and putting them separate in separate living housing, and it created a disconnect from the seniors with the youth. We lost that ability to see them in the community, to hear them, to interact with them, and have them blended. And I never thought about that like that, you know, until that person made that, said that. So they want to figure out a way, how can we reconnect the young and our distinguished members of our community to have a dialogue ongoing, to kind of talk to what Attorney Todd talked about, the big E and the little e. How do we learn some of the things that we need to know about our history, and just talking to each other, you know, from a different perspective. And one other maybe item was that they wanted to incorporate a model that would not only just work with the individual, but would go into and do a family intervention services, so that everyone is understanding what everyone else is doing collectively, so that you just don't do George and don't do the mother, the father, the grandmother, the auntie, the cousin. Everybody have a discussion, so everybody know what needs to be done, and they can work collectively together.
Something like intervention mapping.
There you go. Right. And then we ended, someone came in and gave what I call the benediction kind of thing. And he said, well, you know, we all need to somewhat atone for the things that we haven't done, and step to the things that we need to do, to take ownership. And so I kind of liked it. That was a real good closing. And so with that, I will submit these bullet points within the next day or so, as well as I will review all the text messages, and then we can then figure out what needs to be put together and so forth to put together some action steps as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, George. We're ready to go on to the next one. Any questions?
Oh, thank you, Paul.
I think that's for you.
Yeah.
I think
I'm gonna hold it.
I talk kind of loud anyway. On that recommendation about the prisoners and the insurance companies, it wasn't suggested as a donation from the insurance companies. It would be that the homeowners would pay their homeowners insurance to the fire department. In my town alone, that would come to about $6 million a year. And they had 127 people on their fire department, and they had an average of 25 fires a year. So if it was a complete burnout, the homes at that time were worth about $250,000 at the most. So they would be able to rebuild those homes for $250,000, which would come to $2,500,000. But the fire department would have to get hired on the fire department. You would have to be qualified as a carpenter, electrician, and then the prisoners would be trained by the fire department, which that was the way the recommendation was. Not that the insurance company, they're the richest people in the world, insurance companies, and I lived in my home 47 years, and I only made 2 claims to my insurance company, which both was less than $1,000. And I paid $1,000 a year for homeowners insurance. So that was the point of it, was to fix a place like home arrest, but not home arrest. It would be their own place, and that they would be trained during the day and get a certificate, and also that they would get paid while they were helping the fire department that could go toward like their fines or child support, people that had lost their license and got incarcerated. And I know of some young black men that haven't been able to get their license for 15 years. It's kind of hard to go out and find a job if you can't get your license. And it would just be a repeat thing. And that was the purpose of it, was to stop making insurance companies rich and do something for the community and our prisoners. That was the way it was.
Okay, thank you very much. Congressman, do you have any comments on the reentry side?
I think I'll just comment as we end.
Okay, y'all.
Okay.
Public health.
Yes. Okay, I'm here representing the Chicago Department of Public Health. We were also with Mildred from the federal side, and we had, of course, our state, Illinois Department of Public Health, so the health departments were all represented. Dr. Mason did the presentation, and we helped to talk about and give some ideas of what we could bring to this point. In the public health, we really focused, Dr. Mason put out the framework of obviously looking at it through the lens of history, if you will, but of course through our concepts of thinking around social determinants. We think of things like adverse childhood experiences, which we always call ACE. So I had to make sure I know my acronyms, but we call it ACE. So we looked at that, and he really brought out the part that is not included in ACE is this concept of self-hatred. It's not in any of the ACE indicators. For those of us in public health, we look at indicators all the time, but we do not measure how self-hatred in these videos, in these homes. Again, you heard it today from several people who talked about how they hated themselves, or in our case in the room, we saw the video again of picking out in 2000, again, young people picking out colors of people who were bad and good. Bad was always dark and good was always white. So again, the self-hatred index is not measured. So we need some self-hatred prevention strategies. And along with that, and again, that's in the adverse childhood experience problem. concept of ACE. We need adults to really take this test. Dr. Mason did give this test to a room of people in the Black Caucus of the American Public Health Conference, and they scored exactly the same as the youth did. What did that mean? It means that Black adults hate themselves too. They didn't heal. They didn't know who they were, and even as a professional, hated themselves. Now, I thought that was very telling because all of us know how to take a survey. That's what we practice. As an epidemiologist, I give out surveys. You would think I should know how to take one, right? They had the same scores as the youth who had taken them. So that means, one, we're not capturing what self-hatred really is for Black people. And then two, unfortunately, in my world, we measure everything. We don't have an indices to measure it. So we'd like to offer that as one solution. Trying to measure I like the other side. Let's look at self-hatred prevention strategies. The other part was parents. We're using the term parents, but we will say caretakers because we know that everyone isn't just, it's the grandmothers, it's the uncles, the aunties. So parents must talk with their youth, especially Black men, young men, about their health. Please do not just leave that up to chance or who's on the street. The street is not going to teach them the proper way. It's going to teach them another way. So the caretakers must talk to them about health, and if they don't know it, send them to the public health departments because we can do it. The other thing was caretakers need to identify with youth and take their actions. If they cannot do it, please provide a better understanding of health, and if you don't want to give the right information, we prefer you don't give none. Don't give none. I'd rather you do that and let me deal with the clean slate than me trying to pick out the bad slate. Then I got to clean up the misinformation. So if you can't do it as the parent or the caretaker for these young men, do not do it. Send them to the public health departments. We have lots of partners. We will provide the correct or the best health that we know possible. And that's really big for something in public health, that we're trying to do the best that we know possible. And finally, Mildred is very big on this part. She says we must mentor our young men to be health providers, not just doctors, not just the nurses, but we talking about health economists. We're talking about health analysis, and I threw in health epidemiologist. I am Yas Simpson. I am an epidemiologist with Chicago Department of Public Health, and we would love to see more Black men do what I do and do it better. Thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you.
Do I have a question? Yes, ma'am.
How do you go about, with the Willie Lynch,
Yes, ma'am.
all that kind of brainwashing that's been happening for over 400 years, and also with the media that's also portraying the Black African American in a negative way? How do you combat all of that powerful, negative, wicked influence? And how can you
self-hatred
prevent? What is your preventive service? Because it's got to be profound.
Yes, ma'am.
Up against that $1 trillion media. Internet.
Yes, ma'am, and is beyond the measures of money. Yes, but what I will say to you is that we did discuss the media in the session with Dr. Mason, but as Sister Ya, I'm gonna tell you clearly, first thing, we need the right spirit. Second thing, we're gonna need culture. Now, I come with a whole lot of culture because I'm an African, but the African cosmology gives us the language and how to deal with. It's nothing bigger than that which created the sun. So I don't care how big that media is, we can be just as more powerful, but we've gotta wanna do it. We can't do it if we're constantly hating ourselves. And first, let's just identify with who we are here. People can't even say the word they African, Black, nothing. But part of this to combat, to answer your question, is consistent behavior over time. Dr. Barbie, you're right. So I go back to what I know and grew up with, and that's how we can address it.
And also, you think another way that it could be addressed is through their history. By the time the Black African American community really knows their history, basically through the Bible, since the Bible is the blackest book ever, if you really research it. I think that probably would be a good eye-opener if they just went all the way back to the beginning of creation, because the first human being ever was the bones that they found was a black
Yes, yes, they called her Lucy. So again, to your point, and I think is everyone's point here, is that we must know our history. Of all our research, history is best qualified to reward our research. That's Malcolm X. So what we must do is always combine it in everything. As a scientist, I can't even start an experiment if I don't even know what? The history of it. So to your point, you are absolutely correct. Now, whose history, how are we going to get it taught in the schools? I think the education people take that on. But in science world, we always must start with the best that we can of who we are and where we're right then. And then we can do our best to reach back. But I'm not even saying we have to reach back. We can start current and move forward. I mean, even if you don't have all the history in place, you can start right now with the best ideas you have and move forward. For us in public health, we want to recreate and generate the concept of health equity. Health equity. And that concept has been out for a long time, but I am pushing it as best I can. So there's not equality, it's health equity. And that's where we can get our young people to learn that concept and become, again, public health practitioners themselves.
Okay, we're going to take one more question in the interest of time, because I think it's like
yes,
4:45. I don't mean you, I mean
yes,
our contract is over for this facility at 5:30. So we want to try to go through them. Otherwise, I could stay here, and I'm sure the Congress could.
Yes, ma'am, in the orange.
Let's get one.
Oh, she's speaking the self-hate music. Again, music is a reflection of culture. So what's out there is because the culture accepts it. When we don't want to accept it, we don't buy it, we find our own systems, that's what goes forth. But you have to want to know that we can create our own, and giving the avenue to other peoples to create that type of music is what the big business is doing. We're going to have to find an alternative. To me, it says that's the last question. I do apologize. Thank you all so much, and I'm so grateful to have been here at this conference.
We'll have an opportunity to review this again in the future. I think John and James are, who's reporting for Family Strength? Are both of you reporting? Okay, Family Strength looked at poverty, homelessness, housing, and other issues.
I'm man. Strong black men.
Strong black men.
Thanks, sir. Strong black men.
Good evening, everybody. How are you? Our perspective on approaching the Strong Black family was to focus on being a victor and not a victim, in a way that we could actually take control of what's in front of us. So one of the things we talked about, there are three issues: community development, poverty, and, if you will, housing. I'll take community development, if it's okay.
Go ahead.
We emphasize the need to work with our young people to expose them and let them be experienced concerning the issues of this conference. So in the manner we call kitchen table talk, when we sit with our children and imbue them with the values and the kind of stick-to-itiveness they need, we suggested that we sit and have an intergenerational dialogue. Some folk who've been there, been through something to get their breakthrough, to share with them the kind of work values, study values, education values, etc., to move them forward. So in this kitchen table talk, where you can break some bread too, you would sit and talk with your elders, and then move forward to learn and engage about how to live, learn, and change the world. So that's one of the issues from community development. Another had to do with looking at capital opportunities for small business so that we can encourage entrepreneurial pursuits. We also want to, this is most important, reconstruct the concentric circles of support around the black family. In particular, helping the father understand his position as a provider, as a nurturer, and as someone who is going to protect the black family. So that's what we have for community development. You want to do poverty?
I'll take poverty. We looked at expanding out-of-school programs that focus on economic development, e-commerce and nurturing environments to encourage the importance of buying black, and doing business with each other, as you all so eloquently put earlier, so that the dollar will circulate in our community and build our community. We also talked about developing a list of Black-owned businesses and resources and educating older citizens around the use of electronic monetary instruments. What came out of our discussion that was important is there is a need for an intergenerational conversation about business, family, homes, and one of the things that we said is we want to start playing where the puck will be in 10 years as opposed to playing catch up to where the puck should be today.
Absolutely.
Come on, come on.
All right, I'll let my brother take the first one on housing and I'll take the last one.
Housing was a challenge.
Yes, yes.
And I'll tell you, we did some research on cutting edge material from JP Morgan Chase Bank. And what it says essentially is that the average person, and we went throughout all the counties here, doesn't have enough money to take care of a 1 or 2 bedroom household. Now we've got that, please.
How you would have to work, if you're working on minimum wage, you'd have to work 101 hours a week to afford a 2-bedroom apartment, I'm sorry. That's 101 hours. But that's okay, let's cut that if you just want a 1-bedroom. If you just want a 1-bedroom, you can cut your hours down to 85 hours a week to afford a 1-bedroom house.
And Congressman Davis's office, Tiama, you have that particular study from Chase Bank. So all that information is there, broken down by county. And it's 2017 in terms of its origin.
Wow, that's powerful.
There was another issue.
Staggering for us. That was staggering for us. It was staggering for us.
I mean, it speaks to the need to encourage, number one, the minimum wage going up.
Yes.
Okay. Number two, to encourage, individuals getting the kind of education they need to not be a victim in this. But the institution at large is a problem. It's a problem. There's another point I don't know as much about. And I'm going to leave this to my brother James. We will do it together.
I knew you were going to say
there was an agenda in the room. Let's be real.
I tried to give it to him.
At what point we said, no, we're not going to give that to Congressman Danny Davis.
Sure did.
We ain't even tried to do that. There's a political issue out there that somebody brought to the table concerning the Chicago Housing Authority.
So we're going to couch this under, it was recommended to us that we recommend to you all to investigate the lack of the use of funds provided by HUD, held by CHA to develop low affordable housing. Once again, it was recommended to us to recommend to you. And so we have done our job in doing that recommendation.
Yes,
Amen.
That's what I'm talking about.
All right. And the last one is to develop an affordable housing land trust to address the utilization of vacant properties owned by various governmental entities to establish affordable, rent-controlled, purchase-controlled housing. Amen?
And I sent you an email, so you have all these things already.
All right. Any questions?
Questions? We have 2. Hi, Keith.
I don't see any questions.
No questions?
Amen.
Okay.
It's all good.
I have a lot of questions, but I could talk to you guys later about it.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so the next one would be, thank you so much for that. Mental health, substance use with Marvin Lindsay.
Period. It's a period. Keep them coming. Strong Black men. We love you. We love you.
How you doing? Our workshop was on mental health and substance abuse, and we had about 4 CEOs of substance abuse programs. We had a couple trainers, and our conversation started off on identifying issues around substance abuse among African American males. And one of the things that really stood out for me and that we talked about was the idea of trauma. one of our speakers talked about PTSD, and I've always thought PTSD stood for post-traumatic stress syndrome. He said it's prolonged traumatic stress syndrome for African American males. We also talked a lot about family and education and, you know, the lack thereof, and one of our speakers talked about ADD, which I thought was attention deficit disorder. And he said it was ancestry deficit disorder. And that was one of the themes that was talked about in our session, where African American males in particular kind of felt isolated. And we looked at mental health and substance abuse as just a kind of solution to what they were going through. And so we tried not to make it, pathologize it or make it something bad. It's something that happens in communities. We also looked at the solutions around, for example, say if somebody goes to treatment for mental health or substance abuse, they take that person out of treatment and put them back into the community. And the community they come from is probably sick. So you take a well person or a person getting well and you put them back into a sick environment. So what we tried to do was look at prevention for the community and prevention for treatment, treatment for the community, I'm sorry. We definitely focused on drug and mental health education, particularly in African American schools and with young African American people, males. We talked about a team approach out in the community. Where I grew up on the west side and where Danny and my mother worked, it was a place called Miles Square, which is still there. And one of the things I remember as a kid that we talked about was community health workers that went out and identified people in the community with mental illness, substance abuse, heart disease, whatever it was, and brought it back to the center, and then somebody went out and did an assessment. So we're talking about putting something in place like that, especially for mental health and substance abuse. We also talked about 75% of the people in jail are for substance abuse or mental health issues. And a lot of them are there for their first offense. And we talked about having, pushing for legislation for first-time offenders of any kind of drug offense that be required to have a treatment, mental health or a substance abuse assessment. One other big thing that I think needs to be worked on is around messaging. And messaging in terms of how mental health and particularly mental health is viewed in the African American community. Around stigma. And we have to find a way to destigmatize it. We also talked about joining forces with the reentry community, which we have a lot in common, you know, in terms of calling on legislators to develop policies or whatever it is. And one other one was a need to move away from traditional treatment approaches that does not work for African American males. It needs to be more flexibility in how you are able to use funding, and that's difficult now in an age where managed care and health insurance pretty dictates how much what you do treatment. So that money will have to come probably from federal government, you know, in terms of programs that really identify different ways to provide those kinds of flexible kind of treatments. So.
Thank you. That was very good. Very. Any two questions? Any questions?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, let me bring it to you.
Beautiful.
I just wanted to say, is it any programs to help mental children that has problems, and we want to stop them from being crazy? And don't mention kid anymore because kid is a baby goat. Mention children.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for correcting me. There are programs for children that have mental health issues. We do need to probably develop a resource guide for that, for children that have mental health issues. What was the other one you? Well, you checked me on that. I ain't gonna say that no more. So you ain't gotta worry about that.
Okay, there was another.
Okay.
Okay, this is the last question, and then I think we have one youth.
We know that counseling, mental illness is a taboo for us as black people, and specifically for black men.
Right.
Also taboo is rape, molestation while they're young. If they never address it, how could they ever be fixed? That boils over into the community in terms of what happens to the baby girl and even old girls, senior citizens. What can be done about that? When will we start that discussion?
No, we talked about that a lot in the morning session because what happens, particularly with African American males, they are not taught how to deal with their emotional life, so they stuff feelings, and so what are some of the ways we can at least start to educate young people around not being afraid to express their feelings, having some safe place to talk about their feelings, not feeling isolated. When we say isolated, we're not just talking about physical isolation, we're talking about emotional isolation, I had a young nephew that told me he walked out of his house and he stepped over a dead body and kept going.
Come on. Oh, Lord.
And I said, you did what? And he said, I just kept going. I had to go somewhere. He had no feelings, no emotions, So what happens, I know what happens over the years, you cannot deal with that kind of trauma and emotions and not release it in some kind of way, whether in unhealthy ways. And so I think it has to be more work in schools, and we talked about this, that deals with the emotional life of children, particularly males, African American males.
Okay, thank you. I think we have youth. Dwayne, do you want to report?
Keep them coming. Keep black.
Absolutely.
We love you. We love you. Bye.
I think we love you too, Mama T.
I know you love me. I don't think it.
For the youth program, we only did one because by the afternoon, the students were gone. However, what we did is we had a series of different speakers from the university, from Microsoft, Google. We had a robotics piece. So we really allowed Facebook, et cetera. So the youth, the speakers are the ones who presented. We didn't do as much interaction as I wanted to do, but there's a couple of conversations that came up with jobs. I was a little surprised that most of the students were older. I saw the average age looked like maybe 17, 18-ish. Some of them thought it was a job fair, and when we spoke to them early, we were telling them, more of the nature of what the conference was. So some were looking for jobs. Some of the conversation, though, education. One thing I noticed is that I would throw questions out, and very few would answer. I mean, we had all of these tables were full. So one thing is about confidence and self-esteem. You know, when you're confident, when you have self-esteem, you can project yourself and speak comfortably, whether you're amongst friends or strangers. So that's one thing that I think, and that's not an academic thing, that's more of a socio-emotional learning kind of confidence building thing that I noticed. One guy later on asked, is there anything as far as getting into college? So we had a person talking about college, but a lot of students, you know, talking about college is like talking a foreign language. If they don't have a mother, father, anyone who went to college, having that conversation is very strange. So I don't know if that's someone going into the schools who've been to college. One thing I did realize when the panelists were talking, they paid attention when the people were talking about college and where they were from, because they identified, you know, with South Side or West Side or wherever they were from. So I think having people who have been to college, graduated, expose them to things that they've never known, I think is very important. I think, though, to really get into the meat of what the young people are looking for, we'd probably have to have a more focused panel of students and really gear that conversation toward what are the solutions, what are some of the things you're going towards, because I don't know if the students were just shy to speak in front of other students, but they did not communicate as much as I wanted them to, and I think maybe it was, you know, a panel, us versus you, versus let's get off the stage, let's get into the round table, let's have intelligent conversation, and I think they'll open up a lot more.
Any questions? I think this young lady has a question. Thank you.
This is just a little comment. Okay, my grandson doesn't talk to me. He texts me. And I think our young people don't know how to express themselves anymore except on social media and on their phones, okay? They do not talk. I mean, you know, if I hadn't learned how to text 5 years ago, I'd be out of it with my grandson.
So let me ask you this, should we have them all, and instead of presenting, like text to them, and then they text back? So then I think as adults, we need to be more intelligent and teach them intelligent conversation, because when you're talking about texting, when you're talking about applying for colleges and universities, they write terribly. They cannot spell. So we need to have intelligent conversations. We need to have them to write. So I don't want to go down to their level, because the world is not going down to their level. Universities are not going down to their level. Jobs are not going down to their level. They're going to have to come up to the level of a standard. And I think if that happens in the home, one thing we didn't get to, I wanted to, is that according to Nielsen, African Americans spend 7 hours and 12 minutes a day consuming media, since you're talking about media. 7 hours and 12 minutes a day consuming media. Hispanics are 6 hours and 30 minutes a day, and whites are 5 hours, and that's a lot of media for all of them. So the question is, how in the HE double toothpicks can our kids go to college and do what they need to do consuming that much media? So therefore, parents need to do a better job of parenting. They're spending too much time on social media. They're spending too much time texting. So parents need to sincerely, if you're playing 2 hours of video games, you need to give me at least an hour and a half or 2 hours of homework. So how is it that in every indicator, and I mentioned this to the boys, African American boys are the lowest academic performance, graduating from high school, graduating from college, the lowest on the totem pole. That's a problem. The government is not going to solve this problem. That problem gets solved in the household with parents doing what they need to do, and stop saying, I can't control my child. They want to text, who bought the phone? Who bought this? Who bought that?
You have to talk the same language to begin the conversation. I teach reading and writing in my church, and I've been doing it for years. Okay, they must learn how to cheat to write properly. That is a must. I help them write resumes and college letters of admission. But in order to talk to them, I have to start out in their language. And then we come to my
Do they speak English? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I'm just saying, texting, in order for me to even get my grandson, I have to text him. He will not call me. But then we started talking. After he texted me, I'm like, call me. And we start talking. But I have to talk his language before he'll talk mine. That's all I'm saying.
No. And I respect that. But what I'm saying is every human being rise up to the expectation or go down to the expectation. So what we have to do is, it's almost like you're saying this is acceptable because this is the norm. And I understand that that is a reality now. However, we have to begin. If you go to most people's houses, you can go to restaurants, you see a whole family at a table and 5 people are on the phone. That is absolutely insane because no one is talking to each other. So we have to train. They were trained to text. They were trained how to do all this other stuff, or educated. Then we need to educate and train how to say, listen, we're going to have family time. Listen, we're going to have talk time. Listen, we're going to have and believe it or not, the young people want that attention. But according to the stats, the average parent spends less than 10 minutes a day talking to their child. So therefore, the parent doesn't really want to talk to their child. So you may be an exception to the rule based on what the statistics are. Yes, sir.
Okay. We're going around this way.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Microphone coming.
That's okay.
No. When everybody came up and gave their reports, I think everything is interrelated. When you start talking about the youth, what's going on with them and trying to relate to them. When the young lady over there was saying about the health issue and finding out about the self-hatred, and when the doctor was saying about the mental health. I think the thing is, everything is coming to narrative. The problem is everybody follow along that narrative on the point of saying, well, this is today's society, this our society going, and as us as a group, this we fall in. And it's a thing about not just self-hatred, but self-shaming. And you see some of these kids, as you said, not saying anything. Some of them may not want to relate, and some of them feel like they can't relate. And that's the gender gap that's going on, and that's something we got to break. Now, I understand, I was hearing one of the speakers saying, very respectful, saying, well, basically, we need to go ahead and put the social media down and tell them, okay, put it aside. And I agree with that. It shouldn't rule you. But at the same time, we got to accept technology is here. That's what I'm in. I'm in technology. I understand it's growing. Everybody is using it. We're using it now. So we got to keep up what's going on, and we can't be scared of technology. We need to learn what's happening also. Amen. So my thing is just saying, in closing, is that basically you are right. We got to, as parents, we got to relate to our kids, and we got to understand if we got mental health issues, or we scared to talk to them or deal with what's going on in today's society, we got to check ourselves because they're not going to get better until we get better.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's take this one, and then her, and then we're going to close. Then we're going to give it to Frank to close out.
Brother, I compliment you for all that you said. And
Thank
I'm
you,
in
sir.
harmony with holding a standard makes some sense. I will say as an addendum, not a but, particularly around social and emotional education and self-efficacy, self-identity, and self-agency, that it's important that recognize that some parents are not going to be at that standard.
Absolutely.
And that we have to create circles of support outside the family and out-of-school programming that will encourage exactly the standard that you want. So I think everybody's saying the same thing in the same circle, but it's, you have to meet the kids where they're at.
Right.
And you have to also meet the family where it's at.
Right.
So I like what you're saying, and that's my addendum to it.
No, I was going to say I agree wholeheartedly, because here's the deal. Let's say if you have 1,000 children, let's just use that number, 1,000, right? Based on the stats, 70% don't have a father in the home. Just based on the stats. So that means 700 is a single parent household. Let's say that half of that number, the mother's working 2 jobs and really just doesn't have time. So therefore, we're down to at least 500 students who will not get male attention, who may not even get mother quality attention. So therefore, we cannot assume that we have the luxury to not create a net for our young people. So that net may be 2 or 3 of us may have to mentor 25 or 30. That is impactful, because I know it from personal experience on the work we've done with the young people, because trying to do the one-on-one, we don't have enough of us to go one-on-one. That will not happen. So we have to create a net of people who are intelligent, because the other thing is students only become what they can see, what they can talk to, and what they can touch and hear. Some of these students, when they saw this, they had never seen an intelligent, educated black man on a microphone ever. They had never seen a panel of intelligent, educated black people ever. So just the view, Congressman, of them being able to see gave them another level of possibility. So what we have to do is expose our young people to the possibility, and it doesn't have to be one-on-one. It could be group. Okay.
And I like to add on. I like to make a comment as to what you're saying also. I teach in the public school system, and I have students who are hard sleeping in my class. So I'm calling home to say, what's up? And then I said, do you have a television in your bedroom? He said, yes. Mama's exhausted from working. That TV is putting them to sleep babysitting. I called the mom. Get the television out of his room now. And take it out of the sister's room too. And she got kind of upset with me. He comes back to school, he go to sleep again. I said, what's up? Didn't your mama take the television out like I told her to, asked her to? He said, yes, but I have a cell phone. I call back home. Take the phone too. So, and I'm going to say that and add on to it. My grandchild comes up to visit her dad. She's in her phone all the time. I told my son, take the phone from her. She does not need that phone all day. Put it in a locker. If she wants to talk to her mama, she'll see her in 2 months when she meet her to pick up from the train station. So I'm doing that. Even my children, my biological children, I have 5. They're grown now. They're about your age. I tell my kids, they never could walk around with headphones on. I want to hear what you're listening to. I want to hear it. If you cannot turn it on and I can't hear it, you'll never, and they never wore those in their heads ever. My baby is 26. And also, I took all of the TVs out of their rooms. None. Now, they bought TVs, got cable when they got old enough. They did it on their own, but no. And I don't have a TV and haven't had one in 15 years. It's only because I took it away from them. I put them in the basement. I never got them. I spend that time reading my Bible.
Let me say this really quickly. The gentleman who spoke earlier, Chip Johnson, he just got a very new position in Chicago Public Schools that's over all of like parent resources. I really believe what we need is a parent instruction, because a lot of our parents, they don't know, or it's not that they don't care. Some are working 2 or 3 jobs, so that television is their babysitter because they don't want their baby outside. They don't want them in the streets. So that television is the babysitter. I would be interested in some of the mental health professionals here. Just like we talk about addiction of drugs and alcohol, I honestly believe these phones and television is an addiction. I really sincerely do, where they have to have them all the time. And even adults, we can be guilty of that too. So I think for some of the younger parents, we need parenting class. Just like the kids need mentors, parents don't come with a handbook. So we can't assume that just because you're a parent, you're teaching your child properly.
Okay, I'll be really quick. I'm a counselor, and I was a school counselor for years, and we used to do something called the developmental model in the schools, where we went into classrooms and did lessons from kindergarten all the way up to 12th grade. And then because counseling duties got all messed up, a lot of counselors don't do that anymore. They just do the putting out the fires. But I always made it a point, no matter what, I was going to do this developmental model and go into classes. I've been retired for 5 years. I have a private practice. I cannot tell you how many kids, black kids, white kids, whomever, call me up to this day and say, I still remember that lesson you did when I was in 2nd grade. You taught me how to make better choices, and I want to come to you now for counseling. And these are kids who are probably in their 20s now, it's like 17, 18, 19, 20, but that developmental model, I think we need to bring that back and make it mandatory in the schools. And then the other thing I wanted to say is real quick, to get the kids to engage, I'm involved in this group called Listening to Youth, and Flora is partnering with us. And what we're doing is setting up youth advisory groups across the state of Illinois. We have 8 pilots right now, and what we're doing is letting students from middle school to high school have a voice and really listen to them. We're training facilitators to not tell them what we want them to know or what we want them to do, but we're letting them tell us what they need. So I just had to say that. If anybody's interested, I'd love to have you join our committee and get trained or whatever. So thank you.
Okay, now this is the last one.
Last one.
Okay, my name is Kimberly and I'm from a financial services. I'm a financial educator. And what I see is we have programs out for the children, right? We have support for the children in our community, but we need stronger families. We have to implement leaders, whoever is here. We have to go more out to outreach to our families first, because in actuality, most children just want their mother and their father. That's going to be the first thing. You can go in and you can put programs in. However, they're going to go back home. And while you have left your office or left that program, those children are there 24 hours every day with that dysfunctional father, or the father that isn't there, or that mother that's working every day. So what we need to do is try to figure out ways where our families can be stronger. A man and a woman, a family, a wife. It takes 2 to raise children, because that's what the Lord says. So that's going to be the first thing. Number 2, we have to deal with the lack of financial education in our community. We don't know anything about investments, therefore our futures can't be built. Any civilization builds first. They use finances from the days of old. We don't have any of that because we're not aware that we need things like life insurance. We don't have an inheritance for our children's children. Any civilization trying to live on lack of inheritance will not survive. So that's going to be the first thing. Number 1, build stronger families. Get your outreaches together. Do what you got to do to support marriage and family. Let's get our women and men out of the clubs and out of the shopping centers, spending all their monies there, and let's take some of that money and invest in our children. Our children don't do what we tell them to do. They do what they see us doing. Absolutely. So if we do that, then we'll be able to reclaim our communities, have stronger communities, finances will come back, and the streets will be safer so our children aren't getting shot down every day. So let's start there.
Thank you. That was great.
Okay, I'll just sum it up by saying this. I think it's a consensus. Our black community, we're in bad shape. All right, we can't play with it. We can't pretend. Everybody knows it. Like every other community knows it. So we can't pretend like it's not. Also, we're talking about family. Family is stronger than blood. It goes beyond the bloodline. We have to begin to really, even from a leadership standpoint, are we looking out for ourselves? Because when I look at other, whether it's politicians or whether it's business people, they make sure that their people, race, ethnicity, heritage is being taken care of. We take care of everything and everybody else except ourselves first. And that's, we don't like it. I don't know if that's revolutionary or not, but that's something that we got to start doing with this conference. And I applaud Congressman Danny Davis, because I guarantee somebody probably wanted to be the state of the brown male or the minority male or the LGBT male, whatever it is. He said, let's make it the black male and let's keep it consistent. If we raise up the lowest, then everything else will raise up. And right now, the black man is on the bottom of every factor.
Thank you. Well, let me thank all of us. Each one of us are the sum total of our experiences. We're the sum total of what we've learned. We're the sum total of where we come from. And we're the sum total of what our beliefs are. I hope that if anything that we may gather from each other is that truth is the light, and the light is salvation. And acknowledging truth does not necessarily mean that you approve of it or that you're promoting it. You're saying that's what it is. Black men and boys, black families, in spite of the Willie Wilsons, in spite of the Tom Todds, in spite of the Timur Blacks, we are in bad shape. No matter how we look at heritage, I come into contact with black men and boys every day. And I tell you, some of them struggle. Some of them don't know what to look for, or what to seek, or what to believe, or what to understand. And I can tell you that no race will ever be able to compete effectively with others if almost half of their population is dysfunctional. I don't care how smart you are. If you don't vote, you're about as dumb as you can be. I don't care how many degrees you got. If you don't put the little resource you got into some way where it helps money to move around in the community or the area where you are and live and the people you proclaim to be concerned about, you're just kidding yourself. You are kidding yourself. If you don't learn the basic principles of economics and how to make them work for you, do you know that never does a week go by that somebody don't come to my office asking for a donation to bury somebody? Every week. Every week. Somebody comes by asking for a donation to bury their relatives. We have actually scraped up money and paid for funerals of people who appear to be functioning, but they just never got around to having any insurance. That's just not a part of their being. I'm not talking about 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. I ain't talking about that. You gotta be real. You gotta be real about it. There is a way to reach young people. As a matter of fact, I wanted to be a history professor. So I was halfway through with a degree in American history, U.S. history, but I was teaching kids. And I decided that it was more important for me to learn about the individuals I was dealing with than to learn about history. And so I just threw that to the side and went back and started studying human behavior. Human behavior. I took everything I could take that they was teaching about human behavior. And I taught at a school where the kids basically were being thrown away by the Board of Education. I did that for 6 years. It was at something called an EVG center. The kids were supposed to be underachieving young people. One day we just shut the building down and collected 18 handguns. We had about 500 students, 6 pair of brass knuckles, 12 switchblade knives, and that's who they were. You wouldn't believe it, but I see many of them almost every day now. They 59 and 60 years old. They living, they got families, they make money, they drive cars. One guy runs around with me, he drives a little Mercedes. And often when we go somewhere, people think it's mine. But he was one of my students when he was 8th grade. Connecting technology is wonderful. But I'd be damned if it does not insult me if I walk by you and you got something to tell me and you can't tell me and you text it to me. I mean, that is the most stupid thing I've ever heard of. People are not communicating, they're just textnicating. They don't communicate with each other, they don't know each other, they can't get along with each other, they don't like each other. Some days I just as soon almost not to go to work. And then people tell me, oh, we're going to do economic development. I said, how much money you spent with a black anything?
Black anything.
They in Schaumburg? Are they in Schaumburg? Are they wherever? What are you talking about? If you don't understand the basics, just the basics. I don't know how all these black banks in Chicago went broke that used to be, but they did. They did. People still got money. I don't know why you can't find a black person to buy a car from. We all got one. Everybody got one. But the basics, I mean, we make all kind of excuses for everything. We rationalize whatever it is that we want to do, and we do it. You go to a church on Sunday, and if there are 300 people and you're looking for a black boy or a black young man,
What do you see?
none.
Zero.
The preacher's son or the choir director's son. No others are there. They just really aren't. There are few. I go every Sunday. Sometimes 2 or 3, 3 or 4. As many as I can get to. Parents are not teaching their boys that they can go to church. Now, I ain't the greatest religious person in the world, you know. I drink a shot of Jack Daniels every once in a while. And, you know, I can go to the Rum Boogie Club and whatever. I stop in the casino, whatever. But we somehow are missing learning when to hold them, learning when to fold them. And there are always exceptions to the rule. I used to teach at a very expensive university. out in DuPage County. I taught there for 10 years. You know, I had such a varied life. People have never quite really known what I do. But I taught there for 10 years. And most of my classes had about 25 students. 20 of them were basically white kids whose folks could pay the tuition. And I'd have 2 or 3 Hispanics, 2 or 3 blacks, and maybe 1 Asian. But honest to goodness, and my students came from suburban places, black students did. And many of them just didn't do the things that they needed to do. I visit colleges and universities all over the country. I've driven hundreds of miles to speak to students, and they tell me they'll be down soon as some television show was going. Paul Jakes and I drove to Western Illinois University one time. I had some young boys I knew there who were frat brothers. And they said that, you know, things would be all right. But things will be all right. Because all things are possible if you only believe. But don't believe in magic. Believe in hard work. Believe in faith. If you would have the faith of a mustard seed and say to yonder's mountain, be moved, the mountain will get out of the way. And if you believe that you can overcome, one of the young people asked me not too long ago, he says, you know, I have a speech impediment, and I think I want to go into public stuff. And could you say how I might overcome? I said, you know, you won't believe it. But when I was growing up, my nickname was Puff. And the reason it was Puff is because I had a speech impediment. I was tie-tongued. And when I tried to tell the story about the 3 little pigs, I would get that mixed up and say, we'll huff it out, puff and blow your house down. And my mother helped me to overcome that by simply telling me to slow down when I talked. And I discovered that if I slowed down, I could understand myself, and others could understand me. What we really want to do is to stay connected, one thing. The other thing that we want to do is keep promoting opportunities for young people to be engaged. I'd like to see a Boy Scout troop on every block. A Boy Scout troop on every block. A YBA program for youth. A reading club. I told the guys at the barbershop yesterday that I wanted them to start a chess and checker club. They play chess and checkers while they're waiting to get a haircut. And they are ready to do that. They just said they'd never thought about it. That they will start a chess and checker club for kids who want to learn how to play. So I thank everybody who made the day possible. And let me tell you something, though. I don't get in a whole lot of hurry. No, I'm serious. Because I think you want to tell me about the time.
Yes, sir.
The university will understand, I'm sure, if let me just tell you. Over the years, I couldn't even add up how much money I have helped this university get. I'm talking about millions and millions and millions and millions and millions. Not that they didn't deserve it. They do deserve it. But the way our systems work, I helped them to get it. I was an advocate for it. So a couple minutes over, the chancellor ain't gonna be worried about that. Some other folks might be, but the chancellor won't. So please stay in touch with us, and we will stay in touch with you. And we will implement things that we talked about. Just start it and keep moving. It will get there. Miss Annetta Wilson, I thank you for Sankofa and for Sankofa starting with us with this. It's been a great week. Tiama Romero, you've done an outstanding job of planning and coordinating. Nicole Harvey, you do great work interacting with our ministers and our faith groups and keeping them connected with us. I thought I saw Marquita Smith
And Sharita's over there.
standing out in the hall. And Sharita Logan, actually, the young fellow who came because Sharita is our staff person who deals with education. She is the person who connected us with this young child prodigy. And she's also our district director. And so with all of us working together, Gerard made a speech, best speech I ever heard him make. And he did an outstanding job. And we took Gerard to Northern Illinois University to go to college. We took him, drove him, put his trunk in Floyd Thomas's van, and got him enrolled. We don't profess to do things that we don't do, but one thing I do know, Trent, thank you so much. I am proud that you're my nephew, and that little Trent is your son, and he was in a thing with Spike Lee not long ago. But I do believe that you can't lead where you don't go. And I don't believe you can teach what you don't know. George Williams, we thank you for all the work that you do and continue to do. A brother who would come in all the way, John, from New Orleans just to be with us and be a part of what we're doing. Mildred Hunter, you are my connection to minority health at the federal government level, and we love you. Sister Yah, a lot of folks didn't even know what epidemiology was until you became. Harry Reese, I thank you for going to that funeral today and bringing me the information. So we thank everybody.
Our planning council.
Pardon?
Our planning group.
All the planning groups, we must have interacted with at least 500-600 people during the process of planning. And the reason you do that You know, the lesson is I'm a politician. And the first thing I have to do is get elected, otherwise I don't exist. I'm saying not as a politician. And those of us who do this kind of work, other folks don't know it, but we say that we are campaigning every day. Everything that we do, people are looking at it, people are analyzing it, they scoping you out. They want to know if your tie is straight, is your hair combed, did you get a haircut? A lot of folks don't know that about this business. They think this is, you know, just out having fun, slapping somebody's back, getting some perks. Ain't no perks. I got up at 4 o'clock yesterday morning in order to get here for the day to catch a 6 o'clock airplane. I went to bed the night before at 1 o'clock because we had late votes all this week. We were considering appropriation bills. The night before that, I went to bed at 1 o'clock because I got home about 12 from over at the house. But it's still a lot of fun. We've had a great weekend. I thank the University of Illinois at Chicago. I thank everybody, everything, every sandwich maker, every person that plucked a grape, every person that chopped some tuna.
Can TV.
Can TV has been with us the whole time. We want to thank them. The most interactive television in Chicago, anywhere. You can get on there and have your own show. You can have people call in. And what would my last recommendation be? My mother taught us this. Just be yourself. Be who you are. She taught us this little poem, and I'll close with it. She taught us that I have to live with myself and soul. I want to be fit for myself to know. I want to be able, as the days go by, always to look myself straight in the eye. I don't want on a closet shelf a lot of secrets about myself, and to fool myself as I come and go into thinking that nobody else will know the kind of man that I really am. I don't want to dress myself up in a sham. I want to go about with my head erect. I want to deserve all men's respect. But here in the struggle for fame and pelf, I want to be able to like myself. And above all, no matter what happens to be, I always want to be self-respecting and conscience-free. God bless you all. Have a wonderful evening. Go to church in the morning. I am somebody's church. Thank you. Thank you so much.